Today we are here with two aquarists, and we are co-hosting this event with Planted Aquaria from Canada. So we have Tom and Vince, who is joining us on this live stream today. Our topics will be on beginner techniques for planted tanks. From what I hear from Tom is that Canada is still a rather new market for planted tanks. And many folks there are just starting out with their first tank or their first time experimenting with things like carbon dioxide injection. So we'll be talking about topics that focus on what beginners can do to have a good planted tank experience. Yes.
I think it's a great topic, especially just because Canada is still up and coming. And me and Vince talk about this all the time. The community is really small here, and I say it a lot that he's the one holding a bunch of aquascapers together here in Ontario.
Okay, all right. That's cool.
Taxscapes.
Yes.
And that's a group of collective aquascapers, specifically in Canada, that get together, talk about their aquascapes, their passion, and they even each other out when they're looking for contestscapes, I believe, right?
Yeah, so it's the main group is definitely in the States, but here, especially in Canada, that's the funny thing is that, as you mentioned, we have all sorts of people. Some that have been doing aquariums for 20, 30 years. But the idea of doing planted tanks in Canada is definitely much more modern of an idea. Now, we do have our old school guys that, they do everything to the EI index and they do everything classic. But for the most part, this idea of, with the YouTube or the pandemic, people want to have a little bit of nature back at home. And that's where the planted aquarium starts.
You're stuck at home all day.
Exactly.
So what do you think are some of the key challenges that make it difficult for people there to start with the planted aquariums?
So one of the questions I get asked for majority of my customers, I can't say all, but majority of them will ask me how to pretty much take care of the plant. And ideally what we do is just keep it simple for our customers, and we tell them get the comprehensive fertilizer, which is the all-in-one, and just dose accordingly. Start with 1 pump a week. If that doesn't work, increase the dosage slowly by slowly. Okay. But by me telling them that, I don't think they are fully realizing why or how the fertilizer is important for their plants. I get a lot of customers actually, or a handful I should say, that come in and they think that they can just solely rely on their fish waste and fish feeding to grow their plants. And in some cases that works depending on your plant, but if you are going towards more demanding plants, I would say that just purely off fish food and fish waste is not enough, right? So pretty much for those customers, it's why do we need to fertilize? Why do they need the nutrients? Why are certain plants low demanding and some require nutrients as opposed to the other plants where they do not,
Yeah, I think that a very big difference between the aquatic habitats and, let's say, land plants is that in aquatic habitat, your water-soluble nutrients for your substrate is actually easily washed away, especially if you're someone that do more water changes because you have a heavier fish load or due to you wanting to, let's say, solve some algae issues. And this constant, I call it washing of the system, you lose your water-soluble nutrients. So it's unlike, let's say, you have a potted plant, where you just add a little bit of fertilizer to the soil and it lasts a long time. The aquatic system is one where the system is open to this nutrient outflow as you do water changes, as the nutrients leach out of your substrate. So there is this angle where we need to replace it more regularly. And nutrients that we don't replace just get lost.
For sure. So I guess that's another question is, we know that if you go online and if you're injecting CO2 in your aquarium, the guaranteed or the recommended guideline is 50% water change once a week. And I guess for most of my customers or viewers, why 50% and why once a week, Yeah,
I think that on the water change side, the advantage of big water changes is that it allows you to also vacuum away quite a bit of the detritus and things like the decaying organic material in the tank. And the biggest thing that this does is that it reduces the incidence of algae. And this may not be a huge issue for folks that are running the lower light tanks, but it makes a huge difference for people that are running like CO2 and highlights. where once you have organic detritus and let's say a lot of dead leaves on the bottom of your tank, the incidence of algae increases much more. Yes. Yeah.
So I get that answer, but some customers would argue that if you do large water changes, it will ruin the cycle, like the beneficial bacteria and all that stuff will die. And that's what they're worried about. I've heard stories where customers tell me they do like a 20% water change and they killed their fish, for example. Right?
Okay. Oh, I think that that happens in area where either the water quality is bad or they have heavily chlorinated water that they did not realize.
True
so,
enough.
for example, for folks that are used to being able to get away with a 20% water change without adding dechlorinator, their chlorine level may be at, let's say you have 1 part per million chlorine. You can do a 20% water change, and the amount of chlorine will not be at a high enough level to affect your livestock or cycle. But if you do a 50 or 100% water change, then it kicks in.
Makes sense.
It can, in some cases, in areas with really poor water supply, this can also apply to things like heavy metals. So let's say you have copper piping running into your system, or naturally high levels of copper in your groundwater. Having a 20% water change will not introduce a level that is high enough to affect your tank, but if you do a 50 or 100% water change, then it does. Yeah. So I think that there are real factors that lead to the outcome where people realize that, oh, smaller water changes seem to work better, but it is generally due to some underlying reason. And I mean, in the chlorine case, you can combat that simply by using more dechlorinator. Yeah. If you have heavy metals, then it's a bigger issue. Because other than RO, there's no easy way to strip heavy metals out in big amount.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I know for myself, like when I was starting at least, big factor that I had was my water change could be a cold water versus something that was, that's one factor. You shock your fish right off the bat. Another element for me is when I went into having the CO2 and high technology, so I good high-tech system, and I did a water change right in the middle of my schedule. Crazy. So what I did, I spiked the pH as well, which all my friends told me, they were all upstairs, they're all floating on the water, telling me, you did something wrong. And I think those are things that for beginners, as soon as they start into the hobby, there's so many factors that they don't think. The temperature, as you said, the metals, whether it's even changing it during a pH, are you doing it late at night or not? Like myself with my work, I have to do my water change at 2 a.m. I finish work, I go in and I do my water change. It's just better for me. I know that it's going to be something that's steady, and I think going into routines is something that's the most important thing. So whether you're dozing in the morning or you do your water change later at night, and this is something that's going to be easier. But as you mentioned yourself, having a high-tech system with something like the lights, having something like that, it's quite important to remove the decaying system. I know myself, I get caught up sometimes when I did like a big diorama. It's a lot of dead zones. I'm going to have my trees that are blocking everything. If I don't move the water myself, well, this will create algae. It's just a thing. It's just a situation. And it's quite funny how some people love to mix the idea of I'm not fertilizing because I believe that this will bring algae, which in reality, it's not. You know, it's not necessarily the one. It's maybe you're not removing the detritus, or maybe your water change. There's so many more elements to it.
Yeah. How do you get around that problem with the cold water yourself?
So for myself, whenever I do the cold water, it's not too bad. It's a matter that I usually keep my water into 72, 74. I do like it a little bit cooler than the 75 in terms of Fahrenheit, pardon me. And what I do is I like to have it a little bit cooler for the plants. I know that whenever you have something that's too warm, you're going to have your fish that are more active, they will produce more, they will want to eat more, and your plant will decay as well. Now in Canada, we're quite fortunate because it's easy to warm up your room, while I know in Asia it's the opposite. In some places it's so warm you need water cooler.
That's right.
So we're kind of blessed in that way where I just have a water heater and I keep the temperature at the same stage. Now for myself, especially if I do a tank that is competition or a diorama, I will actually do more than 100% water change. There will be times where I will drain the tank completely, have water inflow and water going outside at the exact same time. So it's a situation. So for a beginner to say, well, I changed my water column and I'm killing my bacteria. Well, my bacteria is actually not filtered. It's actually in the rocks. It's anywhere else in the water column. So it's one of those things.
I do water changes like that as well.
Yes,
with the have more time to siphon and stuff.
Exactly.
Well, they could be killing their fish because they're just simply taking too long.
Absolutely.
Right? You can't have your filter pause for more than, what, like 15, 30 minutes, they say, or else your bacteria is going to choke out of oxygen, and that's when you kill your cycle. Right? So as Vince is saying, I also do 100% water changes. Mind you, there's no fish in there yet, or any living creatures when I'm doing 100% water changes. And
I think many fish breeders actually do that because they feed the system very heavily. So, like
Right.
discus breeders, they'll overfeed the young fish, but it'll be 100% water change every day. So,
Yeah.
obviously, those systems don't crash because they do this commercially at a big scale.
That being said, what's your feeding regimen when it comes to planted tanks with high injection and everything? Do you feed every day, or do you feed every other day?
I do feed every day.
Every day. Yeah. And do you have like a guideline, like how long your fish eats for? So you don't really look into that too much.
I kind of check to just make sure that they're not eating so much that they look a bit too fat.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I guess it's more of a visual check. Yeah, and I mean, of course, I feed enough to make sure that they are not thin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so for Vince, how do you suggest that newbies get around the water heating issue? Do they have to have a dedicated barrel or tank to heat up the water first?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So for me, actually, for anything that's smaller than 5 gallons. So for example, I do have a very small pond. I think it's a 3 gallon. So what I have is I actually have a big water jug. You know the big water jug that you flipped over and it's a water fountain. So I actually have these big jug. Now, if here in Toronto, truthfully, the space is limited. So I live in condo, so that's as big as I wanted without taking too much space. So I have that is at room temperature. It's already pre-dechlorinated. It's already has the room temperature, so I know that I'm ready to do it. Now, when I'm doing something such as a larger tank, so for example, a competition tank in a 90 centimeter or 120, then what I'll do is I actually have on my shower head a tiny little piece of tape that tells me the temperature that I want it to be. Now, of course, making it a little bit too long, I know for a fact that the water temperature will fluctuate. So what I like to do is actually I have a little thermometer, and I'll actually measure the temperature to make sure. If it does get that it's at 1 or 2 degrees, I will actually stop by water change, fill it up, and that will be it. But then I'll go back to it in an hour or 2 hours to finish it. Now, of course, that's when you get OCD, that you really want to do a competition level and you want to get to the most. Because in reality, the idea, I believe, that if you're to do a natural planted tank, stem heavy like yours behind you, or if you're doing something with iwagumi where it's lots of space, your maintenance should be actually much shorter than something that's a diorama with a lot of for me, the water temperature is, I actually have a container that is holding water ready to go. And that being said, I do not fertilize this specific water. I only fertilize when I'm actually doing it. So I know that certain tanks are different. So for example, my smaller one, it is Anubias mainly, and it actually doesn't have anything else. Now I have another one, which is all stems. This one I like to dose a little bit heavier, and I like to dose red color. So I fertilize something different. So that's how I myself get ready for this.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. Yes. For people just starting out, will you guys recommend them to use an inert substrate, or will you actually recommend them to use aqua soil?
So for beginners here, there's actually 2 routes you can take. We actually sell aquarial soil and tropica soil, and also ADA soil, which we kind of consider to be the more like impactful nutrient substrate. And with those substrates, you got to do more water changes. So when customers who want to keep plants here, beginners first time, and they want an easy time going, we recommend fluval substrate. And we've done experiments in the past, and we've been going on Google and doing research as well. We've had no one say that they leach ammonia, like how Tropica and ADA soil does. So with fluval, you can actually add your fish in right away, as long as you're cycling your tank with either turbo start or pre-filtered.
Do you find that having aqua soil substrate for planted tanks makes a very big difference to the overall stability of the tank?
Definitely,
yes?
Definitely. If you want, for example, if you're trying to grow carpeting plants in gravel, good luck. You know what I mean? Like, you can either heavy dose your fertilizers or add lots of root tabs. I mean, I've seen it done before, but if you're a beginner, I highly do not recommend it. Aqua soil is probably the way to go when it comes to growing carpeting plants, or in general, any plants really.
I think it's your question is actually perfect to what you just said. It depends on the route you want to go. Are you doing a lot of a lot of stems. If you have stems, then you most likely would like to have something that they can source from the bottom. Are you looking more for something that is going to be like a carpeting plant as well? You need something that might be a little bit more fine, but actually is rich so that they can do it. But as soon as you talk to something such as the Anubias, pardon me, or the Bucephalandra, which they will actually take a lot of the things from the water column, because the rhizome, you don't want them to be in the substrate. No. So it gets into that. So you could definitely do an islandscape, let's say, with white sand and have all your Anubias perfectly on the top without having to have a substrate. But it depends on what, I think the hobby of the aquarium is that there's so many different paths that one can take. If you want to be somebody who has one water change once a week, doesn't do too much, will be dosing just for the water column, then perhaps substrate will be good. If you're somebody else that wants to have a very lush tank, but then does take more maintenance, then perhaps the aquasoil will be more the path.
Yes. I think that for a lot of newer hobbies, the good thing about having aquasoil is that it's a sponge that both absorbs and also releases nutrients.
That's right.
So it evens out the fertilizing cycle as a whole for the tank. So for example, when you dose phosphates into the water column, a portion of it bonds to the substrate. But as there are fluctuations in the water column happen, some of these phosphates are also released. So I find that it's just a good, if you have space for soil, because like if you are doing a scape, for example, and you want a white sand front, then for aesthetic reasons, you wouldn't want to use aqua soil. But other than for aesthetic purposes, having aqua soil, I find it generally beneficial for other things, even for plants that do not root into the soil directly. Yeah, and it gives beginners especially just a bit more give and flexibility in the dosing. Whereas the more water column dependent you are, the more pinpoint you have to be with your dosing. And I think for demanding tanks, the interesting part about soil is that there is no competition in the local space. So for example, if you look at the tank behind me, where I have a lot of stem plants, when I dose nutrients into the tank, the most aggressive plants will snatch out what they can first. So in tanks that are very densely planted, if you dose nutrients that are the limiting factor, so for example, if your tank takes in a lot of nitrogen, for example, after you dose it, within a few hours, the aggressive plants will take up most of it. The good thing about soil is that each patch of plant has its own territory. So they don't fight with the other plants for what is available in the water column. Yeah. So I think the angle is also interesting that unless you dose very heavily at all times, it's good to have each plant have its own spot, because then it's not competing with the other plants for nutrients, because it has its access to its own root zone, and that one it owns. Yeah.
It's funny because the minute we're talking about this topic, it just reminded me a customer today actually came in and he did not want to use aqua soil, or technically he wanted to use aqua soil, but he didn't want it visible in his tank. So his idea was to cap it with sand, and he got like these mesh bags. So he got the idea off MD Fish Tanks. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a YouTuber. Yeah, so MD, he bags like a bunch of aqua soil in mesh bags, and he puts it underneath, and he'll cap it with sand. And this way, the customer and I were talking, and he said he wants to basically use aqua soil as root tabs to kind of feed the plants slowly over time. And in my thought was, what's the difference between using that and root tabs? You know, can't you just buy sand, cover it on top, put some root tabs in, and it would be the same as bagging aqua soil, essentially?
I think there are two angles to this. One is depending on what kind of mesh bag you use and how much it interferes with the root penetration. I think it'll be okay. I mean, I haven't tried the idea myself, but thinking about it, I think that it would work. And if you ask me whether adding root tabs is similar, I would say that there's no real replacement for actually using soil. The primary reason being I call it the root contact area. So how roots work is that they need the direct contact with the specific elements for it to work. So like there's no radius in a root.
Yeah, Really.
Yeah.
And if you put too much, you're gonna end up spiking your tank with ammonia or
Yeah. Yeah. So unless you can place the root tap extremely accurately, touching the root zone of the specific plant that you want, soil becomes like again a sponge. So for example, if you put a root tap into the soil and the root tap leaches nutrients, it actually distributes to the area surrounding the soil.
Gotcha.
Whereas if you, and due to the ionic charge of the soil, certain elements actually bond to it, such as ammonia. And ammonia will not bond to inert substrate or cause sand. So for example, if you have a root tap that leaches, let's say, phosphates, ammonia, and let's say potassium, the elements can bond to soil particles in the vicinity, but they will not bond to the particles in the inert substrate. So they'll just permeate through your water column.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Yeah. So while the nutrients are in the water column, they still feed the plants. Yeah, but in that angle, I do feel that having root taps alone is not the equivalent of does not give the full benefit of having a soil substrate. Yeah.
A point that you're saying this is that as ammonia leaches to the substrate, we know that it attaches itself to the aquasoil, because as soon as you do, let's say, a big water change, or you move that soil and it leaches up, that's when you can actually kill your fish as well. That's because the inner substrate, the sand, is a slight protection film, but as soon as you open that net in the box, things will leach out because it's such a good sponge. And another element to your point is that shrimp keepers will use aquasoil in order to up the pH. So it shows it has a lot more properties, not just for the plants themselves, but for the aquarium health. It's a lot more to it than just that. It's like the lungs of the tank in a way.
That's pretty much
it.
You're housing it, unlike root taps.
Exactly. Right? And that's why a lot of people, for example, what they'll do in order to almost have a filter inside, or to, because let's be honest, aquasoil can be expensive. So what we do is we do crushed lava rocks into a little bag, or we do platform it in order to have that. And that will have beneficial bacteria that, again, with having soil on top, will help to provide the system. So it's quite interesting to see if you don't want to see the aquasoil, you can definitely have a cap of sand, but I always say not to have too much sand, because if you have too much sand, then that can release some other problems in the long run.
Yeah.
I mention that because in the past, in my beginner Aquarius days, I was plucking out plants from the substrate, and then the next day a lot of my fishes died. And I had no idea why, right? And to your point there is that I was probably releasing a bunch of nitrates from the stems of the roots into the water column. My filter was not collecting it in time. My cycle couldn't keep up, and therefore my fish died. Could be. So you just got to be really careful when, I guess, you're pulling out your plants after,
Actually, another interesting angle on this. This I heard from Tom Ba. I've not tested this theory myself. He says that the uprooting kicks up a lot of basically microbes and dissolved organics, and that actually draws oxygen from the water column. And if your tank's oxygen supply, oxygen levels are at the borderline, then that is enough to tip it over to kill some fish.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So it may not be the so-called ammonia or what being kicked up. I mean, you can test that using a test kit.
For sure.
But
it probably wasn't a direct correlation, is what you're saying, basically.
Now, a question that I have for you. So let's say we're setting up a brand new tank, and this is what I love to do. There's so many different ways now online.
Hundreds.
You can do a black start, a dark start,
a dry start.
A dry start. There's so many different ways of doing it. Now, I know the understanding of the dry start, truthfully, is to establish a tank to root themselves, or to have more of a stronger base. Now, they are immersed. They will have to go through a shocking period to become submerged. That is the thing. The dark start is to allow your filter to absorb the ammonia shock from the start in order to have some form of filter that it can do it. But for all those systems, as soon as you start planting, in your opinion, should you be doing half a dose of dosing of, let's say, APT complete, or would you do a full dose? What would you do in a sense like that when it's as soon as we're getting into a new tank?
I think that
okay,
so I first answer the question whether people should dose at all in the new tank, right? Because that's a very big question. And I think if you have a new planted tank, you should definitely dose. And that's because the root systems of the plants are not established yet. And the root system takes a while, and you do need direct root contact for there to be any absorption of nutrients for your substrate zone. So if you dose it into the water column and plants can absorb it through their leaves, they can actually establish faster. That being said, you can do a much lighter dose. So if you're using ABD Complete, for example, on the new tank, my advice is for people to start with half dose or even less. After the plants have established and their growth rates increase, then you can go to the standard dosage. But you should dose. I think the notion that if I use aqua soil and aqua soil has nutrients and therefore I don't dose for the first, let's say, 2 weeks or first month for some people, the system can work, but it's not optimal because aqua soil doesn't contain the full spectrum of nutrients in the same way that fish waste doesn't contain the full spectrum of nutrients. Yeah.
That makes
so
sense.
My answer to whether people should dose on a fresh tank or not. I think that one action that people should do, but it is a bit more tedious. But I think that it's something that all experienced planter tank people do. Is more water changes for a new tank. I think like competition folks, they'll do the water change every day for a couple of weeks. And it really helps to stabilize the system. I think that for people new to this, they kind of don't understand because like the water looks clean when I'm still doing this water change thing.
Right.
But it removes the volatile organics, it removes ammonia. And yeah, it is one of the actions that is a bit tedious. But if you are afraid of getting algae or plants wilting badly, actually the increased water changes do help.
Gotcha. And in that case, with lighting on a new tank, how would you usually start that? Do you start a little bit low and work your way up for intensity, or do you just full blam 100%?
I think that if you go 100%, depending on what your 100% is, right? I mean, if your tanks, for example, the tank behind me is not that bright actually. It's about 100 par. So my farm tank has 3 times the amount of light as this tank.
Yeah.
So if your target for the tank is around, let's say 70 par, I think that you can start with the full amount and it's okay. In the same way that if you are running a low light tank of let's say 40 to 50 par, I think it's okay to start with the full amount. But if you are very ambitious, you want a 200, 300 par tank, I think definitely starting at 100 par for the first 3 weeks or the first month will be better.
So I know here in Canada, a par measurement tool is quite expensive. You're looking at like $200 to $300. So for I guess the viewers and the customers who don't own a par measurement tool, what's the steps they can take to figure out their lighting for their tank?
I think that from a practical point of view, hobbyists can see how their light set perform on other examples, right? Because all of these commercial lights, it's not just one person that has it.
Right.
For example, you have a Chiros behind you.
Yeah.
Right. I can find 1,000 tanks online that runs a Chiros. I should find a tank that grows the type of plants that I want to grow and see whether it does well with that light system that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So look at examples, I think. It's the easiest way from a practical approach.
I gotcha.
Yeah. So if you visit a shop with many lights on show, I think that also shows as an example.
Yeah.
And truthfully, most of the lights out there that sell lights actually will have par level that are written on the actual specs of it. Because, back in the days, it was the watts or the volts or anything like that. And I don't think that actually means anything. It's just telling you how much energy is your light actually going to consume versus how much light does it input. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, the par is the most precise measurement. It is a little bit more expensive to do, but I think the best way is to look at it. Now, for example, I have a tank at home that I just set up recently. It's 90 centimeter by 30 centimeters. So we're looking at it's not whatsoever. That's right. And at the very top, my light is maybe 10 centimeters on top of that. And my stems at the very back are at the top.
Oh, that's great.
So these stems already are starting to show me orange colors, and it's only been a month, which to me is like, wow, okay, usually I have to trim it a little bit more, put them back in, let them regrow. But they're really showing those sunburn colors, which is what I'm seeking out. But to get back to the point of what you're saying, if something is slightly not as intense, let's say as a light, would you yourself play around? Because my schedule is 6 hours. It doesn't matter what it is. I play 6 hours and I don't do more. I'm very conservative with my plant lighting. It's 6 hours and that's it. Would you yourself, if it's something that's, let's say, 80 pars or 75 pars, would you in that case extend the photosynthesis period by having more lights for, let's say, 8 hours, 10 hours, or in your rules, would you actually cap it at 6 hours or less or more?
I think that for tanks that run very low light levels, they do have a bit more room to run. So, for example, if I ran a low-tech tank with just 20 or 30 par, I'm comfortable running it like 10 to 11 hours. I think that you could run 7 to 8 hours on a super highlight tank, but your tank needs to be very, very clean.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And the extra 2 hours, I do think that you get a bit better color, but this is all the trade-off between triggering algae and having like the very nice density and color of the bushes. I think that the downside of telling beginners to use the par as a measurement is that it means very little to them.
True.
Right. So for a guy that is just new to planter tanks, there are so many things to think about, like, you have to use this thing called aqua soil, nutrients to the water, there's carbon dioxide injection.
Yes.
Do you know what par is? The guy, I think it's a bit too much for them.
Yeah.
That's why I will advise them to just like copy a system that works, and you can take time to understand the numbers in your time ahead. But to start beginner off by telling them that, oh, this is a plant that can go at 40 and this is a plant that needs 100, is a bit too much for them. Yeah.
I agree. That's funny because a couple years back when I didn't know that this hobby existed really, and I was looking to grow my plants, I basically bought a Chihiro's lights and I went on forums and I just copied what other people's settings. I had no idea what to run, right? So I copied Buddy's settings on his forum, what he used, and it worked for me for a little bit. But what I also learned over time is that everyone has different equipment. Everyone has different water parameters. No matter where you live, our neighbor right next door could have totally different water than us, right? So what works for our neighbor might not even work for us. So with that knowledge that I learned, I started playing with my lights a little bit, and I learned that you always want to start low basically and work your way up. Better than starting high and work your way down, because if you start high, you're going to get algae issues and all that fun stuff, right? So now that topic being said, I just want to ask you as well, what's your opinion on splitting your photosynthesis hours? Because I have some customers who tell me they have 5 hours on, 5 hours off, and 5 hours on again, right? I just want to know what you think and if that's good, or should we just keep it a straight full 8 to 10 hours?
I think that for the low-tech tanks, that'll be fine. So for the non-CO2 injected lower light tanks, you can split it in 2, you can split it in 3 windows if you want. I think it'll be okay. For high-tech tanks, the question becomes a bit more complex, because it depends on whether your plant is a species that is used to growing in a short time window, or is so for example, if you are a species from an open lake, you are used to a full sun for, let's say, 11 hours a day because it's an open lake system. It will be very different from a plant from the rainforest floor, which optimizes for a small window where the light breaks through the canopy, and it may only have 3 to 4 hours of light. For plants that optimize for small time windows, breaking it into multiple cycles, I think is not great for their programming. So, for example, if you are growing Laviga Pantanal, this is very specific rate stem, it actually changes through the day. So it's very, very sensitive to changing conditions. So your time of dosing fertilizers and your light timing, your CO2 optimization, everything has to be at peak level once your day starts. Then within the first 2 hours, its form actually changes slightly because it's also a very fast growing stem. So I would not want to break my light into 4/4 for that plant. But that's a very, very specific example.
For sure.
I do think that the majority of aquarium plants are easy enough that people can split the light timing without too much issue. So you can do like a 4 hours on, 4 hours off, 4 hours on thingy. I don't think that is optimal for like people growing the exotics. Like yeah, I
Like the
think
hard
that
red plants and
I
such.
prefer a straight timing, and there are other plant programming issues to do with it. Yeah,
I gotcha.
yeah,
It's quite interesting because when you start observing your aquarium truthfully, and you know, I've been known to wake up earlier, and I see that my plants are actually closed. They are
oh
sleeping.
yes, yeah,
So as they're sleeping, they will wake up. They will
yeah,
go into photosynthesis, and then they will, just like, for example, a sunflower will literally follow the
yes,
sun.
yes.
So if we are literally going in and off, not only are we shocking our plants of go back to
Oh
sleep, come back to sleep, come back,
yes,
but
yes, exactly. Yes,
we're shocking things. Now, another element as well that we have to understand in a high-tech tank, my CO2 turns on an hour and a half before my lights. I literally want to shock my CO2, drop it by 1 pH point, which allows me to know that I actually have the amount of CO2. I go through this situation. My plants are wake up, everything's ready, and then I would say 45 minutes to an hour before that my light turns off, my CO2's done. So if I have to do 4 hours on, 4 hours off, there's a lot more to think about than just turning my lights on and off. The CO2 as well will have to be there. And then it's not just that, but it's also the fish behavior. Now, I know obviously fish will adapt. But there will definitely be a lot to it. So it's what I like to think, and this is maybe the purest in me, it's by trying to compare to nature what's happening. Funny enough, actually, the comment is exactly that. And the aquascaping supply is completely right. Mimicking nature will make it easier for us. Now, we know that this idea as well of getting, let's say, it can lead to another point, but this idea to have a certain look or to have something that, let's say a stem, we want it more on the orange or the red color. Now, there are things that we can do in order to get that, but the idea to remove the algae by not giving it a full 8-hour spectrum by mimicking is, I think for me at least, it doesn't happen. You're creating more problems than by doing so. Now, for me, a question for you, because I know that just looking at your tank, one of the things that you're known for is those beautiful red colors in your tanks. I myself was able to get that by limiting the nitrate in it. When I did that, it's funny enough, I went from APT complete to APT 0. So 2 years ago, stems, I literally did that by changing it. And I saw drastically that as soon as I start cutting it, it grew naturally more red, more red. I kept trimming, putting the heads back inside, and I got this nice bushy red plants. Now, for yourself, when should you go from complete to 0? What is the best way of doing it?
I think it depends on a few factors. So this whole nitrate limiting thing, I think the first thing for beginners to be aware of is that it doesn't work for all red plants. It works for some, and for some red plants, it is necessary for it to be red. So one of the most common plants out there, Rotala rotandifolia.
Yeah.
Right. So it's used as a plant very commonly all over the world. It does respond very well to nitrate limitation. So if you have very strong lights but a lot of nitrates, it still doesn't get as red as if you have a bit less light but lower nitrates. So for certain species such as Lagwigia acuta, Rotala rotandifolia, Lagwigia brevips, they do require nitrate limitation to reach that color tone. But for some other plants like the Rotala macandras, Lagwigia pantanal, they don't respond, and like Lagwigia super red, which is another common plant, they don't require, or rather they don't respond to nitrate limitation. Having nitrate limitation will not affect its coloration greatly. Yeah, so I think the first is to determine whether you are keeping that sort of plant that responds to it. And the question is also, what if you are keeping some plants that respond to it and some plants that don't? Well, this nitrate limitation stuns certain plants in the tank, right? And that's where we come back again to the combination of using the substrate with water column dosing. To get the nitrate limitation effect on the red plants, you only need to limit water column nitrate levels. So if you use a substrate that is enriched in ammonia to feed your plants, it doesn't negate that effect much, I find. Yeah. So one way to feed your other plants, but nitrate limit that bush, is to use root taps for the rest of the plants, and then do a water column nitrate limitation on. Yeah. I think you can do it as long as the plant is healthy.
Yes, yes,
Of course.
that's fair.
If you have a tank where all the plants are not doing well, I think that you need to keep your CO2 levels, your light levels, and your nutrient levels a bit higher so that the plants grow robust. Once they are in robust form, then you can do this nitrate limitation thing. But my advice is also to not cut off nitrogen completely, because nitrogen is the element that is used by plants the most. If you want to do water column nitrate limitation, you should have root taps that have ammonia inside the substrate. So it's like a two-part system. And they actually work together because the ammonia gives this slight boost in growth rates. I find that the way to do nitrate limitation is not to cut nitrogen out of the system completely, but to mainly root feed the plants through ammonia through the soil, and then keep your water free of nitrate. So that is what is done in this tank, for example. Yeah, so the rates are very intense to the rate. And you can get this kind of redness without having published lights. Like if you look at my skin tone, it's quite normal.
That being said, when you started Newscape, are you selective on the plants you choose? Like earlier you said there's some plants that in the wild, they do 4 hours of lighting, and then there's plants that see sunlight for about 8 to 12 hours a day. Would you put those two plants together in a tank, or would you kind of selectively pick your plants so then you don't have to be in that scenario? No?
I think as aquariums we want everything, right? So we kind of try to calibrate our tank systems to be the medium of all this, and we try to grow everything in one system.
I got it. Because you guys released APT Sky, right? This product right here. Yeah, so this, I believe, I just had a quick look the other day, but it enables hard water and soft water plants to grow side by side.
If you start with soft water.
Oh, I gotcha.
If you start with soft water. So you can increase the magnesium and calcium levels in the tank without affecting other parameters.
That makes sense.
Yes. So for example, when you look at a soft water plant such as, let's say, Toninas, right? So Toninas are especially known to be very sensitive to hard water. They do well in acid soft water tanks, acidic substrate, low pH. In the wild, they grow in places where the pH can be as low as 3+4, so super acidic locations. You can, however, have the tank with high calcium and magnesium levels and still grow them. So Tonina, for example, my tanks, I have raised some of the tanks to a GH of about 10.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but my KH is still at 0.
Really?
And that allows me to grow Toninas. But in the same tank, I can grow, for example, Rotala florida. I can grow the cryptocorin flamingo very easily. Because these are two plants that prefer higher calcium and magnesium levels. That's and right. I can have, for example, Neocardinas that breed very rapidly as well.
Yes.
In a tank with pH 5.
Yeah. Just a quick question, because I was always told, or from my knowledge, that KH is beneficial for your tank, right? KH is basically what I know to be the recycling bin for your pH fluctuations. The more KH you have, the less pH fluctuations you're going to have at the end of the day, and that's in turn good for your fish, because obviously your fish is not going to like if the pH is fluctuating left and right all day, right? So
I think that this has both a bit of truth as well as a lot of misinformation. I think that this is the topic that there is the most misinformation about in the fish hobby, actually.
I got it.
Yeah. So on the topic of pH fluctuation itself, there are two ways to get a pH fluctuation, right? You can do it through, for example, carbon dioxide fluctuation.
That's right.
Right. So for those of us who inject carbon dioxide, our fluctuation will be about 1 full point daily. Right. And the other way to get a pH fluctuation is actually by changing your carbonates level, by changing your KH.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So the question is that which change is actually harmful to the livestock or plants?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And people mistake one for the other, but they are not equivalent. So for example, if you have a tank with a pH of, let's say my pH is 5 because of my CO2 injection and I have 0 kH. when I do 100% water change on my farm tank, the pH jumps from 5 to 7. Right. So within 30 minutes, I spike the pH from 5 to 7. And I do this every, let's say, 3 days. Because let's say I'm on a cycle where I want my tank super clean, and yeah. The question is, do I use fish or shrimp in that tank? And the answer is no.
One or the other. You can't have both.
I use nothing. Livestock doesn't care on that fluctuation.
Gotcha.
The changing in pH due to carbon dioxide for most livestock is a non-significant change. But if I change the pH from 5 to 7 by the introduction of carbonate salts, so for example, if I dose sodium bicarbonate into my tank, and I change the KH from, let's say, 0 to 7, and that changes the pH by 2 points, then I will start losing livestock. Yeah. Before CO2 injection was a common topic, I think that most pH changes was due to carbonate changes. And therefore, a stable pH makes sense, because if your pH change, it means that your underlying KH has changed, and that does affect livestock. But pH was never the main or the significant point. It was more on the KH. The other interesting experiment that people have done, like, cichlids, they prefer harder water as a whole.
Right. Yeah.
So the question is, can you keep a cichlid in good form with a pH below 7?
Yeah.
And the answer is that you can if you inject CO2.
Oh, I see.
Also, you maintain, for example, a KH of 11 and a GH of 15. But you drop the pH, let's say 1 full point from 8 to 7 or to 6.9 using CO2 injection. You can still keep your hard water fish as well. So the response is to the carbonates, as in the KH, and its fluctuations that is harmful. pH fluctuations due to CO2 does not have the same impact for livestock, except for some extremely sensitive livestock that come from certain places that need a very pinpoint pH. Yeah. So for, I think, like 97% of livestock, the pH changes from your pH changes is not the important point. It's your KH change. That being said,
it's so funny, because exactly what you're saying is, somebody told me to put, and I'm saying like 4 years back when I started, somebody's telling me to put crushed seashell into a cage. So I literally did exactly what you're saying. I added that, and next thing I know, I killed all my livestock. It's the exact same thing you're describing. It's following the knowledge online. There's so many knowledge, but it's all mixed. And it's if you are dropping the pH because of your CO2, it is a natural thing that the fish will actually accommodate to. But if we're physically changing it with something hard into the soil, we're shocking them, of course.
Yeah. So I mean, and we can also look at nature. And pH fluctuates continuously in nature throughout the day with temperature changes and whatnot. A stable pH, unless it's other than some very specific locations in the wild, it's actually not a natural thing. Like, nature there's a lot of flux in it.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, like
earlier just said, what happens when it rains in nature to the lake,
exactly.
the river, it goes way down, and the fish just adapt, right? So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. On the KH part, it's also a bit more technical than what hobbyists think it is. So it is true that your ammonia oxidizing bacteria, the two strains that commonly known in the hobby, or what, Nastronomus and what, they do require carbonates to oxidize ammonia. So in that sense, they do function at higher KH level. But that being said, bacteria are not the only organisms in the tank that oxidize ammonia. Yeah, archaea and other microbes do their job as well. And I think that, like, archaea are the primary oxidizers, especially in acidic environments that certain bacteria don't do well in. So the ecosystem is much more complex than most hobbies understand it to be. And I think, again, without understanding all the technical jargon, one way is that you can look at examples out there. Are there a lot of people having successful planted tanks with fish and healthy livestock and healthy shrimp with 0 kH? And the answer is absolutely yes. Because of the spread of aqua soil, and aqua soil absolutely removes your kH in most tanks. In all countries with salt water, so you take countries like Japan or Singapore, for example, where our tap water come out at 0.5 kH. Once you have aqua soil, your kH is going to near 0. And for these countries, these whole countries, almost every tank is a 0 kH tank. Also for Japan and Singapore, most hobbyists don't bother raising the kH through the adding of like coral chips and whatnot. But all of us are having these thriving tanks. So I think that there are more than enough examples to show that you can have near 0 kH or 0 kH without issues. Yeah.
And I think that's great as well. What you've noticed and you said is that in Japan and Singapore, you have that water already. So we shouldn't necessarily try to mimic that if our water is different. As long as we have something that's stable, that we follow with this line, fish will adapt. And fish will be quite happy. What they're not happy is when Vince just goes on Reddit and says, oh yeah, seashell things, okay, let's put that in. And then of course my fish freaks out. It's understandable. I think the biggest thing as well, it's understanding as long as you are changing your water, as long as you have your CO2 that's on, and it's a regulator that actually will be providing the amount of CO2 that's constant, because that's something as well that can be changing. So if you have a good light that, let's say, is on the stronger side where you have maybe 6 to 8 hours, or on the opposite side, if it's something that is lower, that you're keeping between 8 to 10 hours, if you wish, and lower part, pardon me, I should precise, not watts, that doesn't matter. And if you're doing something like this, then you should be able to grow plants quite effectively. But the main thing that it is your water change. When we try to play scientists with nature, it gets really tricky because there's so much more that the common hobbyist like myself don't know. And it's one of those things that if we try to toy around with every single scientific thing, I can read Wikipedia, I can read a forum, it does not make me an expert. And by trying to change things, it will actually make it harder for the fish, harder for myself. Because I know that actually Hip mentioned something to me. He's like, okay, Vince, well, something's happening in your tank. Change one thing and wait to see what happens. Because if I change my CO2 cycle, if I change my water cycle and my dosing cycle,
And your lighting.
and my lighting, and my water, and I add a pump, how do I know what fixed it? Algae will come in and out, and you don't know until you genuinely focus everything. So I think that's a big element to it, is the consistency and just sticking to something and slowly tinkering things in order to make it easier.
Yes, I think that for most beginners, the urge to change things.
I just wanted to add one thing to that. I think it's really important for everybody that's trying to learn and grow in the hobby. I think that you should have more of a focus on not learning what to do, but why you do, right? The better you understand why you're making these changes, then you can use that knowledge to make decisions later on, right? So everybody that's trying to learn, remember, don't just learn what to do, but why you're doing it, so that you have the background of, okay, this is the cause and effect of what I'm doing. Because if you simply learn, okay, add seashells, that's not necessarily going to teach you the knowledge to grow in the hobby, to know what to do in the future. You just know what to do in one specific situation, in one specific scenario. Whereas if you learn why the seashells were being added in the first place, then you have the knowledge to make educated guesses in the future for solving problems.
We're talking about this topic because one thing I do tell my customers is consistency is key. If you're going to do a water change on a Sunday, keep it on a Sunday. You know what I mean? Don't change your schedule midweek and be like, oh, I'm going on vacation for the weekend, I'll just come back and do a water change. Try to do it before you go, if anything. But consistency is key, right? Trim your plants on a regular basis or a weekly basis as is. Fertilize on a regular basis. Have a schedule for your water change and your fertilizing and all that stuff. Or else if you're just going by ear and seeing, oh, today I could fertilize my tank, but tomorrow I'm not going to do it, your plants are going to have that shock of imbalance and just not consistent, so.
I think that for beginners, the urge to fiddle is very big because it's like they have a new system, they want to change things for the positive as much as possible. But nature also acts on its own timeline, right? So both fish, even for streams and livestock, other livestock, they take time to acclimatize and they like stability. I agree that that is a huge point to emphasis for the newer folks. Yeah.
Well, of course, it's I kind of compare it to my customers who are new. They're like, why do we have to acclimate fish, right? And I'm just like, what if you open the door? Let's say you're in the Sahara Desert and you open the door to the Arctic freezing cold. Your body's not going to adjust like that. You know, you need to kind of slowly get your temperature used to the cold, right? So same thing with fish. If you take them and dump them in your tank, you're introducing them, or you're asking for shock and asking for trouble. So I would say the same goes for plants, I would assume, but people don't acclimate their plants. And I guess that's my question to you is, do you know why, or why people don't do that?
I think that plants are a bit tricky because they don't give the same feedback as livestock, right? So you can't see when they are distressed, and quite often when it's dying, it's already at the tipping point where you cannot get it back. Yeah. So I think that for plant, it does take a bit more like experience to see what you need to do at a certain point in time. I think that to approach this whole plant angle for beginners, maybe an easy way is to start with much hardier plants.
100%.
Yeah. I think that a lot of beginners get a bit too deep too fast, and they become frustrated. So for example, they will try to grow very difficult or troublesome like stem plants, which I think that beginners should stay away from. Because it takes a lot of time to manage. There are a lot more parameters and things to look out for, and you may want to use more light, which destabilizes the system as well. I think that for beginners, choosing an easy selection and learning how the ecosystem functions for your first tank at least is an important journey. And it also gives you time to enjoy the tank rather than do firefighting every week. Yeah. So to choose an easy plant selection, like having mostly Anubias, Java Fern. If you want to try stems, try the very hardy, colorful ones like Laviga Super Red. So that is my favorite recommendation for beginners. Go and grow Laviga Super Red. You are guaranteed to get color, and the plant can grow in very harsh conditions.
Yeah.
And learn about how the tank system works first. Then once you can run a tank with those easier plants, then you can consider growing something more difficult thereafter. And things like having good maintenance practices as well. How do you efficiently change water? How do you efficiently uproot plants and replant them? These are systems the hobbyist needs to learn before he takes on the more troublesome species. If not, it's a very tedious hobby. It can become a very tedious hobby, and people get burnt out.
All the time.
Yeah, I've seen folks that come in, they try to run like the stem plant tanks, and they get worn out after a few months because they are like, oh, I have to trim, I have to replant, I have to do my water changes. It's just so tiring. And I rather that the guy have a simpler tank that they enjoy and not get burnt out with, that they can enjoy a hobby for a longer period of time, than to like have this boom bust tanks. Yeah, a lot of people that try Dutch tanks have boom bust cycles. Whether is it because they get busy at work or with family commitments. So until you develop the experience and the systems to manage such tanks, be careful about being overly ambitious with your plant choices. Yeah. So my main advice is stay away from stems. Grow small bunches of them, but use more of the plants that are easy to manage until you have the systems to manage these tanks well. Yeah.
That makes sense.
And it's so true, because online as well, especially looking at Instagram, for example, there's so many accounts that have beautiful tanks, and they figure that it's easy because, well, a lot of people are doing it, but it takes time and knowledge. And it's like anything in life, you need to practice, you need to put the time into it and put the effort, and you will be able to get good results as well if you put yourself into it. The beauty about this hobby, it's not like you buy a dog You get him spayed or neutered, you feed him, get him the shots, and then that's it. We all know a dog takes a lot more than that. The difference is that your fish will jump out, your fish will die, your fish will have disease or whatnot. Your plants won't tell you nothing. They'll just melt.
That's right.
And that's the thing about this is they will not start screaming at you saying, don't do this to me or whatnot. So going with the easy category, you know, there's so many plants like Tropica, for example. It does have the easy, medium, and I think it's high or advanced. Hard, yes. Yeah. So if you do easy, as you mentioned, the epiphyte, the ferns, you know, having something like this, it will help. Now, I think as well, it's one of those elements, if like any hobby, it just starts slow, right? You don't become a Formula One driver going to Formula One. You had your go-kart first and such, or any sports, any hobby just takes time. And I think patience as well needs to go with it.
Yes. Also, I have a question from the audience. This is quite specific. What do you guys recommend on how to deal with diatoms for a new tank setup? Because I think that this issue is something that a lot of beginners will face because it is very common for people planted tanks. How do you guys deal with your diatom issues?
So when I come across diatoms, immediately the first thing I look at is if there's any like detritus or any like broken up waste from my plants. Usually it's because it's a new tank. I put in stem plants. The leaves are falling off, and now they're creating like nitrogen and phosphorus in the tank, right? So second thing I would look at, besides the bottom of the aquarium floor, would be my filter. There's a high chance that my filter collected a lot of these waste already, and when I do clean out my filter, it's a lot of like gunk, waste, brown stuff, right? So oftentimes that's usually my solution is clean your filtration, turn your lights down just a little bit so your plants can kind of adjust. And don't go high on the lights just yet, right? Diatoms is kind of a sign for me it's telling me not to mess with the lights. You know what I mean? Unless I'm getting a crazy amount of diatoms and just overnight, then sure, that's a sign that I know I put the lights way too high. But if it's just a little bit of diatoms, I know the plants and the whole aquarium is just adjusting. Just scrape off the diatoms, clean your filter, clean your tubing, do a water change, fertilize maybe, because there's probably lack of a certain nutrient, either it be potassium, iron, calcium, whatever it may be, right? And that's why we always recommend getting the comprehensive, no matter what, until you're like comfortable enough to work with the APT 0 and you know your nitrates and phosphates, right?
And for me, it's quite funny. It's truthfully, I will do nothing in terms. I will not change my water. I will not change my light. I will not change the CO2. I will not do anything. It tells me I have to start working. It means that I have to do the water change, and I will start doing my water change on a daily matter. I will start scrubbing every rock that I can, do my glass. If there's any loose plants that I see, I'll cut them right off. Plants will grow back. But it's one of those things that if you see, the more I give to the diatoms, the more they will come back. And then truthfully, when we say water change, we're not talking about just put a pump in it, change the water. Go in there, do your vacuuming, do your dusting. It's like saying that, you know, I cleaned my place, I opened the door, fresh air came in, that was good enough, right? My place is clean. No, you have to dust, you have to go inside of it, start looking to those stems, really move those stems into it, start floating, get some airflow, get some water flow in those dead zones, and allow your tank to really get a nice cleanup. Do that for 1 week to 2 weeks, maybe 10 days, and traditionally they will go away.
So this is why I think that a lot of the aquascapers especially, they do like daily water changes for the first 2 weeks. They skip this issue kind of because of their very regular servicing. I think that my point to beginners is that don't panic as well, because the diatoms are one of the algae that always looks worse than it is.
That's right.
And because it multiplies very quickly, it looks terrible. As long as your plants are adapting to the system, it will gradually diminish over time. And it is not something like, it is not actually a very persistent algae if your plants are growing in. So with regular servicing, cutting off your old leaves, removing the organic detritus, and doing servicing like what Vince mentioned, it will go away. And when it goes away, it can go away quite quickly. So for a tank that looks very bad, it can actually go into a very good state in a very short amount of time. So this tank behind me, for example, it had very, very bad items when it first started. So I have the pictures of this tank on the Instagram actually. And I've article on it on the website on how did I solve the diatom issue. And for this tank, I demonstrated solving it without using any algicide as well. Even though we sell algicides, I also show you can solve algae issues without using algicides. And the article is on the Two Aquariums website. So for people interested in how I solve diatoms for this tank, you can read that article. And I did two very basic actions. One is that I cut away the damaged and old leaves. And second is I did the big water changes while vacuuming away most of the diatoms. And it took about 3 weeks for it to dissipate naturally. And I didn't do anything drastic other than that. I fertilized, my light and CO2 were the same levels. And the tank just healed by itself over time. And mainly because the plant mass started to grow in and multiply. So it became the more dominant entity in the tank. So you can say that it outcompeted the diatoms naturally. And all planted tanks will do this. So for newbies, I think the key point is don't panic. Don't tear down the tank. You can like sit it out and manage it. And it does diminish with time. And the change can be quite sudden. For tanks at the tipping point, 1 week you have the diatoms. After a cleaning and trimming, the next week it can be like free of diatoms.
That's right.
Yeah.
For this tank behind me, actually, diatoms, it's been up for, I'd say, like a month now, a month and a half, give or take. And I didn't get diatoms until maybe the 3rd week, right? But I was doing like bi-daily water changes. And when we got a little bit of diatoms in this tank, I just threw a couple snails in there. And literally the next day, they ate all the diatoms. Two spots left. But they're doing God's work and they're eating all the diatoms, right? As long as it's not too much for the snails to eat, I think snails are a great, if you can put them in your tank as soon as possible, I think you should, right? Because they'll help with your cleaning and everything like that. Mind you, they will produce a little bit of waste as well, but that's up to the person who is maintaining the tank to clean all the waste out during those water changes, right? So.
Yes. How do you guys do your water changes? What is the convenient way do you think that people should do their water changes?
So for small tanks, I just use, these are my favorite tools, a bucket and a siphon.
Okay.
For small tanks. For larger tanks like the one behind me here, I have a much larger siphon and a huge bucket that is on wheels, and I can roll it to the bathroom. And then what I do is take a pump and I pump the water out into the sink. Right. That's my easiest way that I do it.
Yeah, and for me, it's the same thing as well. Smaller ones will be through a bucket system. But when I'll have a big tank, so let's say it's something like a 90 or 120, I will have the pump that is pulling the water out. But again, I will have the other water that'll come in. What I do by that is I actually have a bucket system, and I'll do the exact same thing. So I'm still vacuuming myself the spots that I want to clean, but I'm having the water change that it's being, or else I'll be at it forever. And I'll be like Popeyes with arms so big because I'll do it by bucket. But I just prefer, I have a Python system. That's what I use myself. And I just have the Python system that's directly just putting it directly into the waste.
So I'm the different one because I have never used a bucket.
Really? So how do you get your water out?
No, so what I do is that I just have very, 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 very long hoses.
Yeah.
The hose will be as long as I need it to be because I don't want to manage a bucket. Yeah. So I can have like 20-meter hoses if it's required to reach the drainage point. And I will only siphon using the hose. So if you ask me, the hoses that are on the retractable rails, they are very, very long. I prefer that method. So in the Two Aquariums gallery, we have like 10 plus tanks. But as long as they are within the hose distance, you can drain them quite quickly. For bigger tanks, I do think that if you have a pump at the end of the hose, it does speed up the draining.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I think that you guys use buckets also because like like Vince mentioned, you need to have your water in the room at room temperature before you refill.
Yeah.
Right.
So in terms of
whereas I refill straight from the tap.
That's what we do here too. We just adjust with the tap. I use a hose and I pour water in.
Yeah, the bucket system is definitely for my smaller tanks. I started I had it for my 120 once, and I tried to do it. I can tell you, the first water change I did is I bought a Python system that was way longer than I needed, but I figured the hose would be the way to save me.
That's right.
I just know that myself, like for example, last year IPLC content, it was a 60U. So we're looking, it's a 45 by maybe, I think it's 30. I'm not sure the dimension, to be honest with you, but it's a fairly small tank. But I had so many pieces of wood everywhere to resemble a forest that I did have dead zones. And that's where I like to actually siphon the very specifics as the water was changing. And that's why I use a bucket system. But that's just CD speaking through, you know, and I have no choice. I like to really precisely go into the cleaning. 60, 36 by 36, as Mr.
Steve, yeah. Well, another reason why I like to use the bucket is we keep a lot of nanofish, and sometimes you might get like a little shrimp or a little stuck in a tube, and you don't want to lose that guy. You paid money for him, right? So ideally, if he ends up in the bucket, you can scoop him again, put him back in.
Yeah, but if you're using a bucket, I definitely recommend having that little dolly that you can push it around if it's a big bucket. Yeah, so that one makes it much easier as well.
100%. Yeah, it'll be easier on our backs when we're older too, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I think that developing these systems for easy water change is definitely necessary for people to want to do regular maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very important to think about your drainage point, your topping up point, and find ways of making it easy for the person doing the maintenance.
For sure. I meet a lot of customers that, believe it or not, they enjoy water changes, and I'm sure Vince is one of them. He enjoys doing water changes. You know, I enjoy it, well, to a certain extent, but like when it comes to a big tank like this, and you gotta go, it's time to go home and eat. Like it's a little bit difficult, and it becomes a little bit tedious. So in our case, we make it as easy as possible. We have a hose connected to the tap. We have a pump that pumps the water out from the bucket. So as both of the things are going on, we could just sit back and just watch it. You know, we don't have to be physically holding the siphon and moving it around. Well, we can just sit on our phones and kind of just keep an eye on the water level of the tank, right? Yeah. So it's much easier for us in that case here. And this is why I specifically love nano tanks. You can get a water change done in like 10 minutes. There's really no excuse if you're keeping a 5, 10, or even a 20 gallon. You should be doing water change once a week if you're keeping a high-tech tank, right? Some customers, I get it. They're really busy with their day. They have things to do, phone calls, they work from home, etc. But it literally takes 10 minutes. You know what I mean? And I think anyone can kind of sacrifice 10 minutes to do a proper water change on their tank if they want their tank to be pristine and top-notch, right? Yeah. And it really reflects, and I say this all the time, is when I go to my friend's house who are just like normal fish keepers, you see their tank is really dirty. You can tell they didn't do a water change for months. And I think it reflects a little bit on how they maintain their tanks and how they keep their fish or their pets, right? Yeah. If you keep your tank clean and someone comes one day over to your house and sees a beautiful, pristine 10-gallon or a tank such as yourself behind you, they're going to know you put a lot of effort and work into that tank, you know? Yeah. So that's one reason why I think you should just be consistent, right?
I think so. Yes. So what do you think about the tanks that use no filters?
You know, I get the love for it, right? Okay. But it annoys me because I get a lot of customers, first-time beginners who never keep fish, never keep plants before. They come in, they're like, hey, I want to keep a fish, but I don't want to do water changes. I've seen on YouTube, you can keep like a bowl as long as it's heavily planted. You can put 1 or 2 fish with some shrimps and never do a water change. And to a certain sense, that is true. There's so much more factors that leads you up to that point where that bowl can stabilize itself to the point where you don't have to do a water change. And just like yourself, if you don't take it slow to learn the hobby, you're not going to know why your plants are growing. You're not going to know why people don't do water changes in the bowl, right? And it's ultimately because the plants are thriving so much that they're cleaning the water for you. But these people come in and they just want to buy one plant. And I'm like, you cannot do that. You know what I mean? If you're going to try this, you got to spend a lot of money on plants, and fast-growing plants especially, right? Or else you're going to have a hard time, or don't even bother at all, is what I usually say.
Yeah, I do think that it can work if you have like they say, a very high ratio of grown-in plants in a stabilized system,
Yeah.
and then you add a small amount of livestock. Because the amount of livestock or the amount of plants in the wild, the ratio is tremendous, right?
That's right.
Yeah, basically it's like you're having a couple of neon tetras in a 4 feet tank. Yeah, sure, that yeah, of course that will. So if you know all these people that say that they want to mimic nature and its ecosystem, that was like, sure, have 3 neon tetras in your 4 feet tank, you can mimic nature with that.
Exactly.
Right, you can't put like a small shower of neon tetras in a 1 feet cube and say that this is mimicking nature. That's not true to your position as well, right? Then if you want to mimic nature, you need to have your soil depth of more than 2 inches.
Yeah.
Because that's where you get your store of nutrients and your plants can grow to good size and whatnot. The smaller systems tend to be unstable. So I think that people can show it off on social media and such for a while, but a lot of them are not. They're not good systems for beginner to base on. Yeah, and quite often for these tanks, especially if they are tanks that don't get dosing, is that they have tap water where certain key elements are present. So for example, your tap water can have most things except chelated iron, I guess. So if you're super lucky, your tap water can have everything from magnesium, little bits of nitrogen, phosphates, potassium. Yeah. So if you're so lucky to have nutrient-rich tap water, you could get away with like a no-dose tank as well. Yeah. But I'll say that that is not an approach that I would sell universally. Yeah.
Do you know who Diane Walstad is, by any chance?
Yeah, I read the book. Yeah.
Yeah, the book, exactly. So I get a lot of customers coming in and they said that they go on YouTube and they find the whole Walstad method using potting soil and cap it with sand, etc. Right? But when you go online and you find tutorials on how to do this, I guess they only show you the good parts. They don't show you the trouble they have over time. Like it's a lie when they say there's no water changes.
No, so you ask me.
I'm positive they do 1 or 2 water changes, emergencies, if anything, to help out, right? But the idea of like a no water change ecosystem, I think really kind of not destroys, but it distracts customers, beginners especially, to not want to try like filtration and CO2 and all that stuff because they think they can grow everything without all these, right?
So for the Walstad method, if you ask me, it's an entire experiment on survivorship bias. Yeah. So when you look at her tanks from Walstad herself, she grows a tiny number of the most hardy species, and they don't look great.
No, they don't.
Her own tanks don't look great. Like I mean, sure, the plants are not dead, but they're not great.
Yeah.
Like it's such a low aspiration to strive for, and it is filled with survivorship bias in the sense that the people who are lucky enough to choose a soil that is comprehensive, that have a tap water supply that has the additional nutrients that are not present to make it viable. And what she does as well, that she admits in the book, is that she'll throw away the species that don't survive, and she'll add in new ones, and that she keeps switching it out until it works, right?
Yeah.
For most people, you have a target plant you want to grow, and you work towards that target, right? Yeah. So I'm really not a fan of that method, even though I think that the book has some useful information in other areas, but I think it's a very poor system to aspire to. Yeah. And I don't think that it is necessarily great for the livestock either.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do that, like you said, 4 feet tank, 4 cardinal tetras, right? If you keep any more, you're going to have imbalances within a couple days already, right?
Yeah.
And what you said, the smaller tanks are unstable because they have smaller amount of substrate, smaller amount of filtration traditionally, smaller amounts of water column. And the biggest thing is the same fish keeper with the same water can have a 120 and a 30 centimeter cube and have drastic differences. You realize that the ecosystem is a lot bigger. Now, when we're looking at the world, like you said, a 4-foot tank in the real world should have, let's say, 4 cardinals. Well, this idea of so is not just that. The water change are not even something that's once a week, water is continuously flowing through the river or the lake, allowing them to have new things. So there's a lot of factors that one has to think that if they are going to be making a 30-centimeter cube that has no water change or no filtration, what are you trying to build? Are you trying to build something on Instagram? Because as you mentioned, people will omit their failures. People will Photoshop their pictures. And truthfully, I know my page doesn't go well when I push an algae picture. I tried it. I put an algae picture. Say, hey guys, this is the reality. This is what world is about.
Nobody likes it.
But it doesn't matter, but that's okay. It's just, in reality, all it is I think for a beginner, is going back to the hardy plants, doing those water changes, and you'll be able to do it. I think there is a happy medium between a nano, a medium, and a large tank, because a large tank will take a lot of water changes at the same time, and will take more maintenance. So having something in between, maybe a 20-gallon or 15-gallon, you'll be a lot more successful, in my opinion, than going something so niche such as a Walstad method or a
aquarium.
It'll be difficult.
Yeah, I think the point to the people watching this is that we are trying to promote methods that give consistent results.
That's exactly it.
And the Walstad method is kind of a wild card, and we, people like us who have been in the hobby a long time, have seen a lot of failures and failures that are not shown. Yes.
Absolutely.
So have you ever tried doing a no filter tank before?
Oh yeah. So in the past, I definitely experimented with it. And like I said, your plants can survive if you use the hardy plants, but they don't look great.
Well, that's just what I tell my customers all the time. Like, plants surviving and plants thriving are two completely different things, right? You could have like an anubias in your tank, and if you don't give it the proper nutrients stuff, it's gonna look the same for a long time. But if you give it some proper nutrients, you're gonna see a new leaf, you're gonna see more roots, you're gonna see it attached to the wood or rock, wherever it be, more often or more quicker, right?
Like for anubias, if it's really healthy, you'll see a shine on the leaf.
Yes.
Really?
So the plant has enough energy to have this slightly waxy cuticle.
Oh wow! I did not know that.
You don't see that on like the low-tech tanks that are not well kept.
And
it's very obvious.
Flowers, I feel as well. The idea, like your Bucephalandra, if you have a Bucephalandra that is healthy, flower. And this idea of having, for example, I had a little pond tank that had no filter, so I just did one. And to be honest with you, the plants were surviving, the plants were, but nothing was thriving. No. And again, it's something different for somebody wanting to do, something very niche for their own fun. But as you said, it's trying to have a system that anybody can do, anybody can work at it, follow those simple rules, and it'll be much more efficient than doing an experiment, let's call it. If you do an experiment, it's an experiment in the end, but it's not necessarily doing it. It's like, you can say, I get my cat and I put my cat over there and I feed them through the robot once every week, and they survive. My cats are good. I feed them once a week. It's like, no, your cat needs more. There's more that needs to be done.
Yes. I think that the easy setup for beginners that have a high chance of success. I think that choosing your own raw soil, like the Walstad method, has a lot of wild cards because it's not a standardized product. I think the plus side of aqua soil, even though it's costly, is that the results are predictable. So for example, if you use aqua soil and you use Java fern and nubias, the easier plants, you don't have to have CO2. You have a little bit of dosing, and the outcome is very predictable, and you have a very high chance of success. Using raw soil, and a lot of people ask me about raw soil because in the past I used a lot of raw soil in my tanks. It is quite a bit more complicated than people realize. Like using a soil is a difficult process because soil is such a non-uniform product.
When you use it, I'm assuming you always got to cap it with sand though, or else it's going to be leaching into your water all the time, right?
No, actually, I have tried tanks with no cap, so it's just raw soil. It works, but any movement in the tank will start
it'll pick up some dirt and stuff.
It'll be cloudy.
Yeah. So ideally, that's what you have.
So it can work. It's just a very messy setup.
No, that's fantastic. I think in the end, looking at all of this idea, whether it's light, CO2, dosing, there's a way that's the easiest way. And I think for me, so like I'm a COVID baby. I started during the pandemic. Now, anything that I do, I want to study, I want to learn more. And that's the beauty as well, is there is a lot of resource out there. You just have to find your reputable source. That doesn't mean your guy on Reddit or your guy around the corner fish tank. I think what you said is looking at what people do that have proven results. Looking at what they do. Go to your local fish store, and if you believe that what they do, you enjoy it, then ask them how they did it. I know yourself, and that's a shameful plug, I know, but your blog is fantastic. Because it's one of those things that for me as when I started, I go to the 2-Hour Aquarist. I'm honestly subscribe to the newsletter. You want to learn it because it will actually give you results. And I'm not saying that in terms of to brush up your ego. It is actually fantastic.
Yeah.
It gives knowledge that you want to learn in order to get better. And by doing so, because it's science behind it, right? There's proven factors of why these things are going at it. So, for example, the one that you said, nitrate limitation on certain stems. Well, there is an article about it. And that is how I knew that my HRA would become a lot more red by doing this little switch. And I think if you are to follow those, and I know there's like Tom Barr has some great articles as well out there. There is a lot of people that have great results. But I'm just saying, don't try to mix sources, because if you go on YouTube of somebody who is showing you that he's building another 90p in next week, well, guess what? It's the same tank that perhaps he just changed because it didn't work out. So those are just things to keep in mind, that Instagram, Facebook, social media, there's amazing knowledge as well. There really is, but it's slightly different, and there is ways
to
look at it.
filter as a beginner.
Exactly.
It's hard to filter what is real and what is not as a beginner, I think.
That's right. Well, just to touch base on what he mentioned earlier, is that you want to learn what you're doing. You don't want to just do it because someone on YouTube said you should be doing it, right? Or else you're never going to know why you're doing certain things. And when it comes to that, there's so many routes, as Vince said earlier, that you can take entering this hobby. You can go low tech. You don't even have to run CO2 to get amazing, luscious growth from your plants. But that being said, you got to be selective on the plants chosen, because certain plants, like I know off the top of my head, we sell a lot of this plant in our store, and it's Limnophila sessiflora. That's one of the easiest plants you can do. You can drop it in, let it float, and it would still grow, right? So for customers who are, I guess, eager to get like a Dutch-style aquarium but don't want to get themselves into CO2, you can start by just learning on how certain stem plants grow. And once you get the low-tech plants down and you nailed it down, you can slowly move up. Now I want to introduce CO2, see what happens to my low-tech plants. And once it's CO2 and you learn about that a little bit, now you can slowly introduce the harder plants like Rotala reddish, Rotala atra, Macandra, whatever it may be. And now you get to experience the difference in a low-tech plant versus a high-tech plant in the same aquarium that you've been working on and you've mastered already. Right? So work your way up there, and don't just, again, I get lots of customers, first time coming in, hey, I watched a George Farmer video on like him building an aquascape and I want to do the exact same thing he did. I'm like, okay, did you keep fish or plants before? Nope. I'm like, I don't recommend you get into like high tech, man. You should just start with Anubias, start with Java ferns, make sure those plants are growing. Once you get those down, sure, come back, add a stem plant, learn a little bit more, don't just, oh, this guy has told me on YouTube that this plant will work in like 82 Fahrenheit. You're going to buy that plant, you're going to bring it home, and it might not even work for you, right? Because different plants are grown differently. I know Tropica grows a lot of their stuff immersed, so there are some shock when introducing it to our tanks, right? And a lot of beginners, they don't know that. They'll just think, oh, I put the plant in my tank, now it's dying, what am I doing wrong? It could not be you at all. It could just be the plant adjusting, right? Yeah. So I think that's what beginners should really just focus on, like Heap said. Just learn what you're doing, learn the plants that you're growing. Don't just buy the plant and hope for the best. That's usually never going to work out.
Learn the why.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the time? 40, yeah. We are running a bit over time. Are there any last questions?
Yeah. I guess we can start ending it now with, are you okay with like some personal questions? I know some people in the comments had a little bit of questions there.
Okay. I'll answer them. Yes.
Yeah. Hope they're still here.
I think we answered most of them truthfully as we were going through. I know we answered most of the questions people were asking. So.
Oh yeah, no, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah, we answered pretty much all the questions that were asked already. Yeah.
Okay. That's all right.
But thank you for having us, Dennis.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure meeting you, Dennis.
You guys are welcome. We can do this again. We can arrange another session with you guys have more questions, and you can ask your audience to send you the questions first.
Yeah.
Then we can work through them again. If you have more. Yeah.
Well, actually, I do have one.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh-oh. Did you hear the question there, or did the live stream cut out?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. What do you say?
Oh,
So it's basically saying in terms of other than clay-based substrate, what are the other options? Is the something?
Sorry. As in for aqua soil or for raw soil?
Well, that's the thing. It wasn't very clear question in terms of that because that's
I think John was asking for an alternative to baked clay substrate.
An alternative to is he asking for alternative to aqua soil? Okay. Freezing again. Right.
Oh, I gotcha.
Ask him about.
Sorry.
What do you think of eco complete? So, John's question originally was, I guess, when you're building the substrate layer, what do you use in terms of building up that substrate layer instead of using a bunch of
what
do you
use?
use?
So my favorite replacement for it is actually coarse lava rock.
Gotcha. That's what we use. Yeah.
Because I can use it for the next setup as well, and it's easy to clear from the tank once I'm done, and it's quite light.
I gotcha. Yeah. That's pretty much all the questions we had. I didn't get a lot there. Yeah.
Okay, so I shall say goodbye here.
Yeah, it was great meeting you, Dennis. Thank you for the interview and the live stream today.
Welcome. Bye, Hip. Nice seeing you as well.
Take care, you guys. And
I'll upload